Viewing and listening public as well. I'm Faris Al-Rawi, Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, and I have come before you this afternoon in a virtual conference to address matters considered by the Cabinet of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago today, specifically as it relates to local government and in particular the manner of the operationalization of its legislation. Ladies and gentlemen, as we are all aware, a local government reform package occupied the attention of the nation for decades. In the course of deliberations, several joint select committees were engaged and hundreds of thousands of interactions and contributions came in a package called the Local Government Reform. Very recently, the miscellaneous provisions legislation was taken out of Joint Select Committee, and that report was debated, and the Local Government Reform Package, which is a package of laws that effectively amends about 10 different pieces of law, that miscellaneous package, that law was passed in the Parliament. That law has become an Act of Parliament. It's now Act number 11 of 2022. And the laws that are amended are the Municipal Corporations Act, the Burial Grounds Act, the Cremation Act, the Advertisement Regulations Act, the Recreation Grounds and Pastures Act, the Highways Act, the Dogs Act, the Property Taxes Act, and the Planning and Facilitation of Development Act as well. That law became an Act of Parliament by virtue of the President of the Republic assenting to the law. That assent was delivered by Her Excellency, and it became an Act of Parliament on the 1st of July 2022. On the 9th of August 2022, at the arrangement organized by the Office of the Prime Minister, Minister Robinson Regis and I held a public consultation at which all local government entities were invited. Letters were written. Specifically, I wrote to every single mayor and chairman of all the 14 regional corporations and invited all councillors, all aldermen, all chairmen and all mayors to a public consultation on the operationalization of the local government reform law. So 1st of July, we did the assent, and then on the 9th of August, we held this public event. Unfortunately, several corporations, all of the corporations controlled by the opposition, boycotted the event at the specific request of the Leader of the Opposition. But at that occasion, as Minister with responsibility for bringing to life the local government reform package, I gave a specific rollout time frame for the operationalization of the law, how you turn the law on. Now, in the law, I point you out to the fact that there's a specific clause, now a section 2 says, the Act shall come into operation on such date as is fixed by the President by proclamation. Under the Statutes Act, we are specifically permitted, as has happened for decades, to partially proclaim the Act, meaning that we can turn on certain sections of the law one step at a time. At the public consultation on the 9th of August, a schedule of proclamation was discussed, and I gave specific notice to everybody in attendance that the Cabinet would be invited to consider the proclamation of this law in stages. Today, I'm very pleased to say that the Cabinet has approved the partial proclamation of the local government reform package as to specific sections. The specific sections include the provisions inside of the Act, particularly the amendments to sections 11 and 12 of the Municipal Corporations Act. And those two sections, 11 and 12, deal with the life and term of local government representatives. Under the Municipal Corporations Act, Section 11, and under the Municipal Corporations Act, Section 12, the life of councillors, persons elected in Section 11, and the life of aldermen, persons in Section 12. Under the law prior to the passage of the local government reform, under that law, it was a triennial period. The life of these entities, councillors and aldermen, these persons, was 3 years in length. Under the reform law, the law is specifically amended. It was passed, assented to, and today I now give you the information that we are proclaiming the move of the life of councils away from 3 years and into 4 years. This 4-year period therefore means that we start the journey of local government reform because we specifically have to roll out a number of things which I'll talk to you about this afternoon. For instance, property tax collection, more revenue into the hands of the corporations, and then bringing to life full-time corporations. That is where your elected members serve. If they are the winners, if it's the mayor and the councillors, they now go into full-time employment, just like the secretaries at the THA do, or just like cabinet members do if they are ministers of government. So the journey of bringing to life the full local government reform implementation now starts legislatively into action on the cabinet's decision that we proclaim, starting with the life of councils moving from 3 years to 4 years. Let me translate this into simple terms. It means that whereas the life of the terms of all councillors and aldermen would normally come to an end 3 years after their election, which in factual terms would mean by the 3rd of December 2022, instead, with the proclamation of this law, as the cabinet has decided the law is to be proclaimed today, with the proclamation of this law, the life of the councillors and the aldermen will now go to the 3rd of December 2023. Constitutionally, therefore, the position of bringing the work into effect means that all of the councillors and aldermen will not expire until 1 year from December 3rd, 2022. Now, this is very important because it is now that we are able to build out in sequential order within the period of that year, and before the life of the council comes to an end, we're able to build out all of the relevant sections of the law that we have passed. And those include, number one, taking councillors who are executive members, converting them into what we call secretaries, just like the THA secretaries in charge of various divisions. Number two, operationalizing 13 separate divisions inside of the local government, the corporations. These, for example, include planning, engineering, they will include sporting and recreation, they will include audit and accounting. We also ensure, by turning on the law as we have decided in the cabinet today, that the next local government election will be run on the basis of the new law in its full form. And that new law involves, very importantly, certain financial benefits to the corporations that are critical for their survival and their efficient operation. One of those financial inclusions will be a section of the Municipal Corporations Act, it's a new Part 5, where property tax, that is residential property tax, will be given to the corporation in which the residences are located. That means that several $100 million now flow to the corporations for them to manage the money yielded from the properties that are located there. So if you have a property tax to be paid, it's residential property tax, that money goes to the local government entity, which is the regional corporation. So Port of Spain City Corporation collects house taxes, property taxes. San Fernando, Chaguanas, Sangre Grande, Mayaro, all of the regional corporations collect their own money. Secondly, there's a further amount of financial contribution to come in, which is now rolling out. And that is when you look to the new law and you notice that it involves maintenance of schools, it means that we also have to transfer monies that are located under the Ministry of Education, for example, or in a state enterprise such as NIPDEC, for example. Those monies also come to the regional corporation. Certain functions at the Public Health Division from the Ministry of Health, and then certain reporting requirements back to the Ministry of Finance. I can say that even though the working arrangements are complicated, they must start. And it is critical, therefore, that we commit, and the Cabinet, by its decision today, has therefore committed that the next local government election, which is due, will be done under the provisions of the new law, so that we end the conversation about local government reform coming at you. It has arrived. Today is the arrival date by the Cabinet's decision. In a nutshell, the takeaway, therefore, is the life of councils will be extended by virtue of the start of the law, which we passed, which was assented to in July 2022, which we had a public consultation in August 2022. That start is to convert the councils into 4-year cycle councils. And every council going forward under every election will be there for 4 years. There will be a municipal council, which is all people who are elected. That's just like a House of Representatives comprising government and opposition. But there will be an executive council, which is a full-time council, which resembles what a cabinet looks like. You're not permitted to be part-time. If we didn't proclaim the law this way, and if we turned on some of the other sections right now, we would automatically disqualify almost every serving councillor because they have jobs elsewhere. Some may be doctors, some may be teachers, some may be involved in business affairs, etc. So we have a phased rollout of the turn-on of the legislation. The first step legislatively is to make sure that the elections happen under the new local government system. That involves the conversion into the 4-year cycle. That involves the rollout of all of the steps required to feed the corporations with more money and give them more responsibility so that they can deliver better service. And all of this happens in the period of the next year in stages. So there will be further partial proclamations. There's certain entities that have to feed back information to us. For instance, what is the salary of a councillor going to be? That's the CPO in conjunction with Minister of Finance, etc. The hiring practices, the consultations have to be concluded with the trade unions to make sure that the hiring practices are in proper order, and with the 2 service commissions that are involved, the Public Services Commission and the SASC, the other service commission. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to inform that we have started the law. In the Finance Act, which we are going to be debating tomorrow in the Parliament, several of the sections in that law, which come from the budget statement, that is where the budget makes a promise, the budget says what's going to happen. Some of these things require law to make it happen. And tomorrow in the Finance Act, the first Finance Act that we're going to do, because there'll be another one, very importantly in that act are the provisions to enable the inclusion of property taxes so that they are given to the municipal corporation. So every corporation collects and uses its own residential property taxes, therefore giving people the ability to have their councillors and their corporations spend money to fix roads, to fix drainage issues, to mitigate floods, to make sure that things work right. I'm confident that there will be several questions flowing from this result, and therefore I'm going to open now the floor to your questions. May I please ask media houses to identify the person who's asking the question as well as the media house that you're representing, because there's several new people joining us in this virtual conference today. Jules Brown.
Good afternoon, Minister. Jules Brown, TV6 News. What would you say to anyone who may be wondering if via this, the proclamation, the partial proclamation that you had identified, that extends the life of the councillors of the corporations by an additional year, that could give the government an advantage in preparing for the next local government election, which obviously would have been due earlier than the time that you would have announced or indicated earlier?
Thank you for your question. Well, I can say that it gives everyone a fair opportunity. And let me explain what I mean. I'm absolutely confident that every corporation, 7 of them under the hand of the opposition and 7 of them under the hand of the government, if you look at the political split between the 14 corporations, all of them would want the opportunity to receive more money in this financial year to carry out delivery and works that are critical. If you look at our flooding issues and you look at our roads and bridges and maintenance, I think that what it allows is for the prospect of local government to work in final form. Please bear in mind that the law has to start sometime. If an election was called now without proclaiming the law, you'd be dealing with the same old, meaning you would get part-time councillors because the law doesn't say that you have to be full-time until you turn it on. And what would happen? It means that you would have to sack all of the councillors either whilst they've been appointed as part-time people or wait for another 3 years. So the government had a decision. Are we going to run the next local government election, which is due, under the new law or the old law? If you ran it under the old law, you would have a 3-year period because you would have to run it under the existing law, which says 3 years before it is amended. It'll be 3 years. You could be part-time. You won't have the divisions. You won't have the extra monies coming in from revenue that the state is going to provide. But it means that you're committing yourself to staying with it for a further 3 years. Because if you run the election on the old law, you're going to have to wait 3 years for that term to expire. And that would take us, Trinidad and Tobago, 2023, 2024, 2025, 3 more years of people not having as much money as they can have spent on their behalf by their corporations. So this is the starting point. The takeaway here is that this is the commitment to running under the reformed law, which we have spent a lot of time and a lot of consultation on. So I don't see it as a political advantage that is ascribed to one party or the other. I see it as an opportunity for the people of Trinidad and Tobago to get what was promised to them in the course of the consultations that they had. And that promise stems from our government for when we were in opposition in 2014 and we portrayed the need for local government reform. And then we had the work engaged in 2015 to 2020. We did all of that and we passed the law. This information came out. We specifically discussed partial proclamation on the 9th of August in a public setting at which everyone was invited. May I take the question from Charlene Rampasad? Sorry, Jules, did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, I did. Just quickly, in terms of the meeting that you referred to, and you referred, of course, to the absence of those members of the opposition, but were they informed in writing, for example, in terms of the decisions taken or the results of the meeting?
No, they were not informed in writing. I can certainly say that. It's why you had a public consultation with an open microphone where everybody was invited to attend and where we had slideshows and presentations and open discussions. A lot of the questions that came from the audience on that day involved, when is the law going to start? Are we going to be full-time? Are we going to be part-time? If we're going to be full-time, what are the salaries? If we're part-time, are we deferring it for a further 3 years? When can we get more money? This is why public consultation and open forum is so critical. May we take the question from Charlene Rampasad, please?
Hi, good afternoon. Charlene Rampasad, Guardian Media Limited. Minister, do you expect any legal challenges in response to this proclamation, and how are you prepared to deal with those if they come?
Well, this is a fully functioning democracy where there's a separation of powers. The judiciary is there to receive any challenge or position that may result. And if and when that happens, the Office of the Attorney General, as a representative for the state, will treat with it at that point. So it really is an uncertainty in my mind. What I can tell you, having participated in the passage of this law, is that this law was passed in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago in its parliament, in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. And this law was assented to by the President in July 2022. And it is now an act of Parliament. And the act of Parliament allows for partial proclamation, which is exactly what we're doing. And we are meeting the promise to the people of Trinidad and Tobago that local government must be reformed and that better services and better delivery of services has to happen. And to do that, you need to give the local government corporations the sustenance and the authority and the position to do that. Do you have a follow-up question?
I do. Forgive me if I'm not understanding clearly. You said that if you had not done it now, you'd have had to wait 3 years until 2025 to do it. But what allows you to do it now and prevents you from doing it after an election, which was due, we know, between December and March?
So an election is due in accordance with the law. The law says, the Municipal Corporations Act says, that you have up to 3 months after the expiry of the life of the council to have a local government election. The law, as it is amended, will now say you still have the 3 months after the expiry of the council. The local government reform package made the councils move from 3 years in existence to 4 years in existence. And that's what we're doing today as one of the things that we're tuning on. If you follow me, if you were to leave the law as it is and don't bring the life of the councils to 4 years and run an election with a 3-year term only, it means that the rest of the law is not turned on. So that means you would invite nominees, schedule an election, and have the election run on the basis of the old law. What happens next? If you just think it through logically, it means you've got the same law with people appointed for 3 years. If you were to try to turn on the law after the election, what's going to happen is you're going to have to invite those people into a different structure. So it's true that you could look at it from both perspectives. You could say that you could change the 3-year to a 4-year term after, and you could do the other steps that way. But what we're talking about is the logical approach being that it is simply important to make sure that the new councils that come into the occupation of local government have the benefit of the full package of the laws. The local government reform involves, and I'm just giving you one example of what is involved, the transfer of monies from the Ministry of Finance, that is property tax, the transfer of monies from the Ministry of Finance from other areas like the Ministry of Education or public health coming from Ministry of Health, etc. And what we have to do is to make sure that the corporations receive the full package. So yes, of course, there will be lots of views expressed in relation to why take the steps now, but our step that is being taken is simply to involve getting the full local government reform package. It's why I pointed out to you that tomorrow in the Parliament is a very important amendment which the Minister of Finance will bring, which he addressed in the budget. So it's no surprise, and which comes in a Finance Act to allow for some of these things to come to life, to fit within the local government reform so that that can be delivered out. May we take a question from Paula, please? I'm sorry, I'm only seeing a first name up. So would you please give your full name and the media house?
Good afternoon. This is Paula from the UK. So I wanted to find out if what, as you said, you expect legal challenges. Did you get legal advice before going forward with the move? And could you clarify what exactly prevents you from implementing changes at the beginning of next term? Is it that law or the government structure?
I'm so sorry. Your every other word was missing in the connection. I got, I believe, part of your question, which is, did you get legal advice? This note was brought by the Office of the Attorney General. So Attorney General Armour brought the note forward for the consideration of the Cabinet. And as the Minister with responsibility for local government, I am now informing of the decision of the Cabinet. I'm so sorry I didn't catch the second part of your question because it didn't come through. Would you try repeating it?
Sure, it was basically asking you to clarify exactly what prevents you from implementing changes at the beginning of the next term.
I'm sorry, I just didn't get that. I got prevents you and then everything else was lost. Perhaps you can try again when your connection is a little bit better. Can we take another question? I'm not seeing any other hands popping up on the screen. I'm seeing Jewel, and then there's someone next to Jewel. Is that Sunil? Sunil, shall we take your question, Sunil?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. Sunil Lala, TTT News. Minister, correct me if I'm wrong. So basically what you're saying, this is going to take effect now. So the local government election will be constitutionally due next year. And second question for me, based on, I know you would have discussed this during the debate before this was proclaimed. What are the savings to having this every 4 years? Because I know holding a general election or local government election is quite costly. So was there any discussions on the savings from this as well?
Sure. So thank you for your question. On the first question, the Cabinet has made its decision to have the partial proclamation. The partial proclamation is in fact intended to kick in on Tuesday coming, because there's a process to get there. The Cabinet decision needs to be then taken to the Office of the President, and then the Office of the President does the partial proclamation. Tomorrow's Friday, and then Monday comes about, so you've got 2 working days to kick in as of Tuesday, November 8th, 2022. In those circumstances, we would, as I said before, the life of the council would go from 3 years to 4 years. And very specifically, in the course of that year, the local government full package has to be delivered. And there are lots of elements to that full package. Increased revenue, creation of divisions, job descriptions, salaries, consultation with the unions, because now the corporations are going to have the ability to hire their own people, as opposed to having the service commissions, for example, engage in the hiring. And that, therefore, is a huge difference. It also, very importantly, in the local government reform, the CEOs now have to take the instructions of the mayors. Currently, the CEOs don't have to take the instructions. The same way a minister of government under Section 85 of the Constitution gives the direction to the permanent secretary in the ministries. Now, the CEOs will operate with the mayors in the same fashion that ministers operate with their permanent secretaries. So these are very critical and important amendments for the workings of the corporations. The concept of 3 years versus 4 years was something that was literally discussed in the period 2006 straight up to 2022 in several joint select committees. And throughout all discussions, it was agreed that the 3-year period was just simply too short and that a 4-year period should be provided. I want to remind you, look at the comparator in Tobago. The Tobago House of Assembly is the precedent that really feeds all of this. You have secretaries in the THA, you're going to have secretaries in the municipal corporations. You have the chief secretary that controls, you have the mayor that controls. You have the administrative functionality coming under the pseudo cabinet that the THA has. It's the same thing here. So what we're doing is we're equalizing the governance structure between Tobago and Trinidad to make sure that the people of Trinidad can have the similar effect to the people of Tobago. As to cost efficiency, it means that you're still going to have your elections. Whatever the cost of an election is will certainly be there. But what we are doing right now is we're ensuring that the local government corporations, the municipal corporations, finally get the powers that they've been asking for in discussions that started decades ago, certainly since 1990, 1989, when we were doing the Municipal Corporations Act. Jewel Brown, we'll return to you.
Yes, Minister. Just in terms of the issue of, there's a recent conversation on past couple of days, but just the general issue of crossing the floor, would that be covered via the, or in other words, would that be dealt with in a particular way via the local government reform in terms of the amendments, or would that be saved from the old law, the existing?
So just to remind you, the concept of crossing the floor was treated within Trinidad and Tobago in the House of Representatives by way of amendments to the law to say what happens if you cross the floor, and therefore you're not in the parliament on the back of the party that you came in, right? That does not have any form of amendment in the local government context. However, what I can tell you for sure is that the local government reform package does not treat with the issues of crossing the floor. So whatever the law was prior is what the law is going to continue to be in that context. Charlene?
Hi again. Given now we now have this proclamation, and you're saying that it would allow for the collection of property taxes, do we have a definitive start date for that collection? Because I know the finance minister would have said it sometime in 2023.
So the finance minister in his budget presentation, and tomorrow, no doubt, when he's piloting the amendments which will trigger the property tax into effect, the Minister of Finance did say in this fiscal year, and therefore, all things being equal, I expect that he will deliver on his undertakings. The very important thing, I'd like people to remember that part of the law that we're going to discuss tomorrow in the Finance Act is the triggering of a tax amnesty. One of the tax amnesties that are being brought to life will involve property and building taxes, land and building taxes, i.e. property tax. Remember, under Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, the property taxes came into effect. They came into law pursuant to Minister Larry Hawaii's statements at the direction of the UNC cabinet. So property taxes didn't arrive under this government. They arrived under the UNC government, and they were put into effect. What has happened is that there have been waivers of property tax or land and building taxes as it used to be in the period 2009 straight up to 2022. To get the property tax position clear, remember, we are saying to the local government entities in a new Part 5, you, the municipal corporation, you, Pinal Debe Regional Corporation, you, San Fernando Regional Corporation, you, San Fernando City Corporation, you, Port of Spain, you take the taxes for properties that are residential and you keep it for yourself. You give an account to the Minister of Finance, but you spend it on the people of the corporation that you represent. And all things being equal, the Minister of Finance will treat with that. I see that Jules still has a further question.
Yes, sir. If, as you had identified, with the subsequent partial proclamations and so on that are to occur, you would have, for example, the corporations collecting property tax and so on, increasing their revenue. Then why the need in that context for a new state enterprise to deal with secondary roads, which would fall under, if I'm not mistaken, the ministry you presently lead?
Yes, thank you very much. So state enterprises exist outside of ministries for certain purposes. For example, you have the statutory authority that is WASA. You have a statutory authority that is the Port Authority. You have state enterprises like the National Gas Company, or you may have UDICOT, etc. The Secondary Road Repair and Improvement Company is an example of a state enterprise. Specifically, there is a need for harmony amongst the corporations. One of the things that we're going to be doing in the course of this year to bring the full package to life before December of next year, that is local government. So we're going to be vesting roads and areas in corporations that are not currently controlled by the corporations. We're going to be vesting them in the corporations. And therefore, the vesting in the corporation is one of the reasons that we need the corporations to be able to have the money to spend on it. So in the interim, one of the reasons for the secondary road company is to make sure that we attend to those works, because some of those things are not vested in anybody. They're not in the Ministry of Works and Transport pursuant to the arrangements in the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act, where they define what are highways and primary positions. They are not in the local government because they're not vested in the local government. So we're engaging in vesting orders right now. And another important fact is, please remember that whilst we are ending the Ministry of Local Government side, we're still keeping the Ministry of Rural Development side, because rural development is critical. And therefore, how you service rural communities also will involve using a secondary road company such as this, which is a state enterprise. So it is a mop-up and coordination company intended to immediately go to work. And as it immediately goes to work, it'll service areas that are not vested, as one of the examples included, and it will also continue in the rural development side of the equation. May I ask if there are any further questions? I'm seeing newsco.tt. I'm not sure who's there. Yes, please. You're muted.
Hi, Alim Khan.
Hello.
From news.co.tt. I'm trying to get confirmation. So the councillor's term will expire December 3rd. Does that mean elections, the next election would be December 2nd or 4th or somewhere around there?
Well, perhaps I could translate your question into how I understand it. In the old law, that is the unamended law, the life of the councils would run out 3 years after they are elected. Currently, that 3-year period, if you leave the law as it is, will end on the 3rd of December 2022. Under the Municipal Corporations Act, you have a maximum of 3 months after the expiry of the life of the council to have a local government election. In the new law, as we passed it, as it was assented to and as is to be proclaimed, the life of the council will expire 4 years after they were elected. The 4th year for the current councils, with this new law kicking into effect, will expire on the 3rd of December 2023. You will still have the potential for 3 months after that, according to the Act, to have an election. I want to remind you that an election can be called, an election is called by the edict of the Prime Minister. So I couldn't tell you, because I don't know, nor am I the Prime Minister, what Dr. Rowley as the Prime Minister would have in mind for that. That is entirely a matter for the office of the Prime Minister that no Minister of Government ever speaks for or about. I hope I've clarified the situation somewhat. So permit me to, Alim, did you have a further question?
Well, no, it's just that you said the cabinet agreed to a fixed date for the end of their term. So I was wondering if the cabinet also agreed a date for the next election, but I got the answer. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Jewel, I see that you have one final question. Can we invite you to deliver that?
I do, but I'm not sure if you are taking questions on any other matters at this time or just on the local government issue. I'll be so guided.
Solely on the local government issue. Thank you so much, Jewel, for the courtesy of indicating that you were outside of that boundary.
Right.
May I therefore...
Right. In that...
Yes?
Right. So in that regard, my question is related to the issue of local government.
Yes, please.
What about, you did speak about residential property taxes being collected by the corporations, but what about the other classifications or categories of the property tax? How would that, which entities within the government would collect those? If you could give some clarification, please.
Sure. The Property Tax Act specifically declares that there shall be different varieties of property tax. That is connected to the Valuation of Lands Act. So property tax operates on the basis of land value. The valuation of lands is where the Commissioner of Valuations comes up with certain values. The Property Tax Act has different species of property tax. First is residential, second is commercial, third is industrial, fourth is agricultural, and then of course you may have vacant lands, right? So there are different species of property taxes. At present, the Municipal Corporations Act in the amendments that are before us now, that have been passed into law and are to be proclaimed in the course of the months ahead, allow for residential property taxes to come to the local government. The Property Tax Act, therefore, manages all the rest, and all the rest go to the Ministry of Finance and therefore go into the Consolidated Fund of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, because there is an Exchequer and Audit Act which creates a consolidated fund. So the Ministry of Finance collects that. In the Property Tax Act, there is a provision which says that the Ministry of Finance can decide if it wishes to give further types of property taxes to the corporations. So whilst we're starting with residential taxes, there is a possibility in law that other things can be considered. But what has to happen right now is that you have to look at the geographical overlay. And let me explain what I mean. If you look at the Couva region, the Point Lisas Industrial Estate, and you look at the amount of industry you have there or commercial you have there, it's going to give you an anomaly. It's going to be odd. It's going to be the odd man out, because a lot of revenue will be created that, for instance, Mayaro may not have, or another area, rural area, Sangre Grande will not have. And therefore, you can't give all of those other types of taxes beyond residential taxes into the corporations. Remember, that's a two-edged sword. So in a heavily industrialized area, you may have less residences, or Sangre Grande may have less residences than Port of Spain has. That's where the Minister of Finance will have to balance the ship to make sure that there's a degree of equality. But all of that, all of those things are things that the Minister of Finance will speak to. I'm only giving you a reflection on this. Charlene, we'll take one last question coming from you.
I know you've been over this a couple times, and I know you just mentioned that only Prime Minister would set dates for elections, etc. But can you tell us definitively whether we'll see any local government election before this term expires on the 3rd of December 2023?
I am the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government and will speak within my batting crease. If you have questions about election dates, there is a very capable and charming gentleman by the name of Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley, who is the Prime Minister of the Republic, and you can address those concerns to him. So, ladies and gentlemen, may I proceed to wrap up by saying, in summary, number one, the Cabinet has decided to have the partial proclamation of the local government reform package effected on Tuesday, November 8th, 2022. By that partial proclamation, the life of the term of the sitting councillors and aldermen will move from a 3-year period to a 4-year period. With that trigger in effect, the life of the councils will legislatively come to an end on the 3rd of December 2023 and no longer on the 3rd of December 2022. In the course of that year, the local government entire implementation package is going to be aggressively rolled out so that the corporations can operate on a full-time executive council basis with secretaries with full responsibility for 13 divisions in law. And in that period of 12 months ahead of us, the monies that are to come from different ministries will be transferred across to the local government cycle. The property taxes will come across. The ability to hire will come across directly into the corporations. The creation of a ministry type operation where the council operates with a CEO who's now like a permanent secretary, that will kick in. The ability to hire people will come in, and the rollout of reform will happen. One of the advantages of this particular position is that we have therefore committed that the functionality of the council, which is next to be elected, that is after, in the next local government election, you'll be bringing in the full local government package. One of the disadvantages in leaving the law as it is that you would probably have part-time councillors who come from different areas operating, who can't therefore become full-time executive members unless they give up their jobs, etc. People need to know with certainty whether they should or can participate in the local government elections. And one of those things is a very basic thing. Are you prepared to give up your full-time occupation somewhere else and become a full-time executive member of the council? Because that's what you'll be required to do. And therefore, this is the first step in certainty to ensure that the new law is fully operationalized. May I thank you sincerely for joining us post-cabinet for this announcement, and I thank members of media for their questions, and I wish you all a very good afternoon. Thank you.
$50 by 20, $50 by 25.
This is Kyron Pollard. When you play, do it the legal way. Don't bet.